We are live. Yay. Hey, Stacy, we're back. I know it's a Thursday, but you were on a smushy date on Tuesday, so we couldn't get together on Tuesday.
Yeah, I wasn't missing Tuesday, so yeah, it was a hot date, so I had to do it.
Well, that's what you do to keep your relationship sacred, isn't it, buddy?
Yeah, you got to make an effort, eh? If it's not growing, it's dying. So yeah, make an effort, make the same kind of effort you made in the beginning, and your relationship will be beautiful all the way through. And that's a message to the men out there: lead, lead in your relationship. Like, there's nothing more attractive than a man who leads. Like, create a date and whatever it is, just make it happen.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna second that because man, I know a lot of my friends and a lot of the women in my life are very, very capable, powerful women. Hugely capable and hugely powerful. They're also, a lot of them are fiercely independent. Now, a fiercely independent woman is made, not born. We're made to be that way because we've had to be that way. And you know what? We don't want to be that way. It sucks. We want to be in our feminine. We want to be treated right. You treat us like your queen and we'll treat you like our king. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better. Like, it's not hard. Like, once you start to understand how, like, to all the men out there, just go and learn how a woman functions. Just go and learn that one thing. How does the feminine come alive? How do you pull the feminine out in your woman? And the first thing I'd say is be emotionally safe, be a provider, whatever that looks like for you, be a protector and lead. Just lead. Like, that date that I set up for my wife and I, we've been listening to that guy for a few years, and I'm like, fuck, he's coming to New Zealand. Like, boom, booked 2 tickets, booked the motel room, told her we're going. Fuck, it's just like, just see her melt. And then you get to the experience and you get to, that what you want to receive, you got to give it first to the men out there. Whatever you want to receive from your woman, you have to give it first.
Yeah.
So many men are wanting it before they are even willing to give it. And I've got a cool question around that too today. So that's going to be good to bring to the table.
Do you want to go straight into your question now and we'll just cover yours?
Yeah, I thought I'd ask. So it's been asked from a man's point of view, but I thought I'd ask it to you from a woman's point of view. So the question I got anonymously was, how do I, if I've been in a long-term relationship and we've been through some hurt, we've been through some tough times, and I've closed down, how can I start to open up safely and allow that to start to cultivate in the relationship? So from a female point of view, what's your thoughts on that, Joe? How do women start to do that?
Is this within the same relationship or are we going into a new one?
Same one.
To be honest, I think go back to self for starters. Find out who you are right now because we all evolve. You're not who you were when you first got together. There'll be elements of you that are the same, but find out who you are, find out what you want in a relationship. And then, if there's been trust lost and, if the relationship has kind of gone one way, go back and find out where that started. Where did it start to unravel? And can you both sit down and talk about that together, like, grown-ups? Can you both sit and have a courageous conversation? Not you did this and I did this, but, think about all the good stuff at the beginning and did you communicate well, or was there always some like little areas that you needed to work on, but perhaps you never did? And that's okay. It's not about blaming. It's about learning. I think go back to that curiosity and it is hard to have, it's hard to be extremely vulnerable, isn't it? It's hard. It's a really brave thing to do, to say exactly how you're feeling, knowing that you may well be rejected. But the more you can love yourself, the more you can value yourself and know that you are worthy, it's worth being vulnerable because otherwise you are kidding yourself. And if you can always honor you, then other things will happen around you, but you can always come back and say, I did the best I could. I was honest about how I felt. And if it falls on deaf ears or if it doesn't, if it lands incorrectly, that's not the point. You've always got to be true to yourself.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love it. Love it. Yeah, and I guess from a man's point of view is, men are avoiding trying to be hurt again. So, and I think it would be the same for women. You know, Peter Crone says past hurts inform our future fears. And often we think we've dealt with those past hurts, but they've actually left a much deeper scar or wound or something that we actually haven't actually got over, you know, whether it's the guilt or the shame or, you know, the fear. So once you start closing, you know, putting walls around your heart, it's very hard to love openly as a man. It's very hard. And if you're guarded up, she's going to be guarded up. And the more you guard up, the more she's going to guard up. And then, you know, it's like each of us are waiting for the other one to open up before the other one will open up. And then you sort of open up a little bit, like Joanne said, with the vulnerability, and the other one closes down. And it's this push and pull, this to and fro. And so I think one of the big things I learned is you've got to go back and, you know, if you're in a long-term relationship, we've all been through things where we've hurt each other. It's just the way that relationships are. But the key to freedom is, can you actually not resolve it so much with the other person? That's part of it. But can you resolve it within yourself? Because as soon as you can resolve it in yourself, and you're no longer afraid of being rejected, which I believe is probably the number one fear of human beings, is being rejected. Because if we're rejected, we're going to be cast out of the tribe at a primal level. And our tribe is often, you know, our romantic relationship or our family. So you've got to really do the work to break down those walls that you've put up so that you can actually feel free to love, because you're never going to get it back until you can give it.
Yeah. And I think there's just there is a primal fear around love in general. You know, I remember reading Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It was one of the books that changed my life, because I've always had this thing about religion, but the way he wrote it, it just made total sense to me. But as he also said, and everything I do is around about self-love. So it was so poignant to me. And he said, if you knew how magnificent you were, you would not be fearful of love. Because what do people do? As soon as they literally say the words, I love you, they instantly, like, think about back in the day when you first got together with your wife, maybe, or, you know, any relationship, you go, I love you. And instantly pretty much a fear comes in. Oh my God, what if you leave me? Oh my God, what if they have an affair? Oh my God, what if I'm not good enough? Oh my God, what if I get fat and grey and old and they don't like me anymore? Whatever the fear is, there's a fear which comes straight after the I love you. And it robs us of that love. However, and that's basically what I was saying before, if you love yourself, it's not as scary to say it. If you love yourself and know how freaking magnificent you are, and that's an alien concept to a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people, but you are all amazing. You are all worthy. You are all majestic and individual and unique and fabulous. And it's just the most heartbreaking thing that most people don't know that. But if you knew that, the vulnerability and the openness and the fear, well, your vulnerability would be higher and the fear would be less.
Yeah, I love that. I always say in my videos, you know, you can only love to the level that you love yourself. And what people don't understand is that your template of love is formed in your childhood years. And it's usually a flawed, you know, template. It's usually a fear-based template, you know, anxious avoidant, or, you know, an attachment style that's not going to serve you. So you know, I see it all the time. Men that say how much they love their children and they die for their children, but they are actually dying. You can see their life is dying because they're afraid to open up, they're afraid to go all in, like give it everything, you know, like what, you know, like you said, could they be cheated on, could she leave, you know, what could happen? And that's actually what keeps us playing small, is those fears that are embedded from our childhood. They're still being projected into our relationship. And you've really got to go back and investigate those, because as soon as you take those shackles off and you realize, yes, she may leave me one day. It's if we're honest,
could happen.
There's always a possibility that something could happen. You know, she could be in an accident and die. There's so many things that could happen that she could leave me. But when I'm no longer afraid of in this moment, like, man, fuck, I'm going to create this date and put it all on the line. And once you start to do that, you're going to see growth. But, you know, after that honeymoon period, most of us go into preservation mode, not growth mode. We go, because that break has happened, We don't know how to address our childhood wounding. So now we're just going to stay safe in our little tribe, which is our, husband, wife, husband, whatever the mix is. So then you just start staying stagnant. Then once you start playing safe in anything in life, you're going to die, because we're here to grow, we're here to expand, and that's what relationships about. So, look at why you can't open up, look at what's holding you back first and foremost, start to address that, have those conversations within the relationship, and allow it to grow and expand.
And self-love, when we talk about self-love, I think people they don't really understand what it means, like to love oneself. And it literally does mean that, just to love oneself. But it's not in that conceited, oh, I'm freaking amazing. I mean, you can say all of that. That's great. And I do speak like that. But it's like, it's not in the how I look and all of that. It's a deep feeling of love for oneself. Like being truly forgiving and compassionate and kind to oneself. Like we offer these things to other people so easily. We forgive other people. We are kind to others. We are compassionate to people. But it's going internal and doing it on the inside, isn't it? And when how often can you forgive somebody else but you don't forgive yourself? You emotionally beat yourself up, and then it sits with you for years and years and years and forever a day, and it molds you and it makes you more fearful. So self-love is this beautiful journey to loving the human that you've been given on the day you were born. You were given a human the day you were born. You've got to love it.
Yeah. I always say the ultimate form of self-love is self-respect for a man. So, just look at where you're disrespecting yourself. Look at the call of your conscience. What is your conscience calling you to do, and why can't you do it? What's holding you back? Because whatever you're seeing from your wife or partner is actually the reflection of the level of love that you are holding within your own internal self. But it's being mirrored back to you, and you don't like it because you're going to have to look at yourself, and and that takes radical responsibility to do that. And everything that happens in your relationship is your teacher. We'll blame and project and all the things, but you've got to, it's such a foreign concept. Like I shared on my video today, if someone had said this to me 3 years ago, I would have said, you're full of shit. Fuck, bullshit. But it's the truest thing I've ever known, that as I shift my internal self, my relationship shifts. So you've really got to look at what's guarded you up, what events haven't you processed, what shadows haven't you brought into the light. Because as soon as you create space will be filled with the next thing. And if you create space from a shadow, it's got to be filled with light. So your relationship will start to grow and expand in that space.
Beautiful. Oh, I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Okay, so my question is that the listener wants to know about us, and I think because we talk a lot about this stuff, you've got to get over your childhood wounds, you've got to do this, and I don't think they're quite understanding what that even means. So they've said, what did you two both have to get over? What did you have to address to, as you say, we were in the dark and now we're in the light. So are you happy to divulge a little bit what you had to overcome?
Definitely. So my journey of life has been pretty brutal. I grew up in a pretty physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive environment. And my mother was very depressed. She ended up with a brain tumor and died. And it left me lost. It left me confused, and it left me stuck. I look back and I really believe I've had the mental maturity of a 7 to a 13-year-old boy, like literally trapped. I could sometimes tap into that, but I could never actually hold it, grow in it, and expand it. I'd always self-sabotage it. And so I had to, when I left school, I was like, fuck, no, I'm going to create the complete different opposite life to my parents. And I did. I went out, I became a millionaire. I created the financial success, the beautiful relationship, everything. And then this pattern had played out 7 times, where I get way beyond what I ever thought I would be able to create. And then like a seemingly invisible force, which was me, would destroy it, would literally blow it up. And it wasn't until the last time 3 years ago where I had the realization, I guess I was ready for the realization, that fuck, the common theme in everything is me. And I keep ending back in the very same place I started over and over again. And this isn't a coincidence now. So for me, I had to go back and look at, one of the big things that came up for me, which I never would have known, is my mum didn't want me. She wanted a girl. And I seen this in a rebirthing breath work where you breathe in warm water. And it was all actually filmed for a guy that wanted to promote his work. And I probably wouldn't even share it if it wasn't filmed. But I went through this rebirthing that took me back to the womb. And it was like watching a movie. And like within a split second, I was in the womb. My mother was rejecting me as my soul was coming into the body. And so much so that she was trying to abort me in the womb. And even when I was born, she still gave me the name she picked out for a girl called Stacy. Mm-hmm. And that name's been the root cause of so much pain and suffering in my life. Because as a young boy, or even as a man, if someone wanted to attack me, they'd say you'd have a girl's name. Mm. And so I'd be fighting and scrapping and trying to defend myself. And if someone had said this to me, I would have thought I had no problems with my mother. I thought it was all sunshine and rainbows. But as I started to bring this into the light, oh, wow. Fuck, I just didn't want to see it, Joanne. Mm. And same with my father. There was a lot of physical abuse, a lot of beatings and a lot of, like just physical hidings. And that had left a scar on me. And so I was afraid to really be seen. So I was trying to be seen. And the minute I had to actually self-sabotage it in case there was pain that came after that. Yeah. So the minute my relationship was beautiful, my finances and my health, I'm too vulnerable. I'm too exposed to that little boy that's wounded, that's been, every time he's been seen, or not every time, but very often when he was seen, it equaled a physical, mental, and emotional attack. And so I had to self-sabotage it to come back down to play small. Mm-hmm. And so that's the stuff that I've had to go through. And fuck, it is painful. I'm not even going to lie. Like, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I've done some pretty tough things in my life physically and put myself through challenges. But going back to bring up the things, when I say bring up the unconscious, you don't even know, you don't even know what's there. Mm-hmm. And when you bring it up, it's like someone smashes your whole reality with a sledgehammer. Mm-hmm. And then there's just this time we've got to slowly piece back the pieces in the form that they were meant to be in the first place, which is all the masks have gone and it's coming back to that authenticity. So, I've done, somatic release journeys where I've been fully cramped, releasing beatings that I got that I wasn't able to release as a young boy. So, there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, and that led to a lot of self-sabotage and pain as an adult. I was recreating these experiences because I hadn't resolved the past. And so that's why I say it's so important to go back and to do this work. So that's my experience.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing, because it is really hard. And it's still, even though we go back and we heal this stuff, it's still painful even to talk about at times, isn't it? And okay, we don't necessarily sit there in tears, and occasionally still I will, about things from the past. It's like, I remember somebody said to me once, when the tears stop, you're healed. I don't believe that, because basically what we're doing is we're releasing some stuff in our body and filling it with love. But the experiences have still happened. But now you're just very conscious of them, aren't you? And this is what, when we talk to people about their self-worth, again, this is like a really good example, because, well, I am worthy. We know that up here because humans, we're worthy. But it's that heart-mind connection, and mind-body-soul connection. So as a little boy who wasn't wanted by his mum, who was, who she desperately wanted a girl, so there was a disappointment there. You would have, even though you had to go back and experience it through a breath work, you felt that energy from the moment you were born. That energy was with you, and it was there. And then you got the beatings from your dad. It was an unsafe home environment, mentally and physically. Well, how can a child possibly grow up thinking they are fully worthy? Like, having that foundation of self-love, self-respect, self-worth. It's near impossible. Don't get me wrong. There's a very occasional person that will come into the world who will, but they've lived before and they've learned this lesson before.
Yeah.
And that's it. They're just an enigma. You see these occasional enigmas walking around, but most of us have to do the hard slog, because right away in a childhood, your self-worth, your sense of self was stripped from you.
Yeah, and if you don't, it's what I learned is, if your parents haven't done the work, and many haven't, most haven't, in fact, you won't develop a secure attachment style. So my attachment style was to fail, because when I tried to help my father on the farm, I'd be, a little kid trying my best, trying to make him happy, doing the best, but I was still a child, but I was judged as a man. And so you start to, you're afraid to shine, you're afraid to win, you're afraid to succeed. And people will say, that's crazy, you're a man now. Well, the program that is in your identity is saying that when you give your best effort, when you show up, when you try, it's never enough and it's going to hurt. So you're going to self-sabotage before anyone else can do it. You're going to become your father before the world can do it to you. Or if it's a woman, whatever wounding with you. And you'll recreate over and over again your childhood until you dissolve it and transcend it. And like I said, it took me seven big cycles. There were some mini cycles in there, but there was these 7 cycles that I look back and I'm like, shit, I did it there, I did it there, I did it there, I did it there. And then I was like, that's a pattern. A pattern isn't a coincidence now. Something is keeping this pattern in the loop. And when you see it, there's a part of you, the part of you that protects you, the ego, is the part that was created in the experience. So it does not want you to go back and look, feel, and process that event. So the minute you start to think about moving forward, getting some coaching, going to a session, whatever it is, that part of you's like, oh shit, Stacy or Joanne or whoever, you're starting to feel that same feeling you did as a child. I'll talk you out of it. I'll distract you. I'll get you to go to that vice, whatever it is. And now I understand why, because those experiences to us as children, to our nervous system and to our psyche, they equal death. A young boy being beaten by his father is death. Like I'm no longer safe in my home environment. My father is now the tiger. So I've been living in that state of fear, my entire life. And so I had to go back and resolve it. And it's interesting because this time last year, my father came back into my life after 10 years of not speaking to him and over 15 years of not seeing him. And I was like, what the fuck? And then he had a stroke, and then no one was around to look after him, and he's living 45 minutes from me, and now I'm the main caregiver. The amount of shit that has come up that I've had to work through, and I can remember going to visit him, and a little thing came up, and I felt myself like a scared little boy in front of my father, even though he could no longer do nothing to me. He's incapacitated from the stroke. My body and psyche still believed that he was the threat. And it came right to the surface, and I felt like I wanted to run the way I did when I was 5 or 7. And I had to process that, work through that, and there's still a bit more coming through with that. But man, and until you realize life's a mirror trying to teach you how to individuate, so become undivided from your parents, right? Become undivided internally from the wounding that was created, which is healing is the modern day rite of passage, because none of us had a rite of passage to individuate, to separate from our parents and move into our authentic adult mature selves. So that's what I believe God, the universe, source is doing through this modern day experience, which I think is a lot more painful.
Yeah, and I agree. And my spiritual beliefs are that we are a soul doing a human experience, and we knew what we were coming down to do. We knew our mission on earth. It's like, do you accept your mission on earth? Yes, I do. And we chose our parents on purpose. So there's that weirdness, isn't there? Like, I've got to heal from all of the stuff that's been put on me, but I know, and this is empowering, I know I chose this because I had lessons to learn in this lifetime. And look at the difference now you're making in the world, Stacy. And, I deal with a lot of teenagers and older people, and I think I just see them. They are just literally angels who are here to change the entire world, because this world needs changing. But it's unfortunate that you have to go through these painful experiences to realize your amazingness and to heal. But it is actually part of the life's journey. We're always healing, whether it's from a broken leg or from our damaged soul. A lot of the human experience is to heal.
I was struggled with that concept for a little while until I did that rebirthing, like I was like, I don't know if I chose this. But when I did that rebirthing, and like I say, it's on camera, it was filmed by a professional film crew to put together a promotional video for the guy that I was working with. And I literally seen my soul coming into my mother's womb, and there was a moment where I had a choice to go back or go in. And I chose to go in. And that's the moment I knew, fuck, I chose this lesson. I was like, fuck, why did you choose that one?
Damn it! Could have chose the millionaire down the road who buy me a car and had a swimming pool.
That's it. But I realized I chose it. But the anger and the resentment towards my mother and my father and all the things that came with that, you've got to unpack. And, the biggest thing I've realized is what was the program that you, or the meaning or the perception you made about yourself, about that experience. Because until you can do the somatic work, that's great. But until you can bring a realization to the meaning you gave to it, you'll often keep looping and a lot faster. You've got to see the perception or the prison that you got trapped in. And it's always the ego will always be a negation to the ego. So a contradiction or a denial of what the ego is telling you need to get or get rid of. So that's a little clue for people. If they've got that voice in their head that's saying, I need to get that or achieve this or have that, or I need to get rid of this or get rid of that. That's actually the first step to you being able to see the lie of the ego. Because if you were meant to have it, if it was in alignment with your identity, you'd have it and wouldn't need it or want it.
Would just be.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? It is crazy. And like, for me, what did I have to overcome? Well, I hated myself, like despised myself. And, I had these 4 beautiful children. I was suffering from really severe depression. And I was in such a place of self-loathing. Like I couldn't say one nice thing about myself, and I was pulling myself, and it was getting worse and worse and worse over the years. So that was my symptom. That was the symptoms. That was coming to the surface. And I was doing everything I could. I was like on the PTA, I was the treasurer, I was doing, fundraising things. I was running 2 businesses. I had 4 kids. I didn't really have much help. I was going to all their extracurricular activities. I was exhausted. And I was still trying to, I was still doing everything at home, and I was still taking care of my husband, who was also my 5th child. And, the way you do. And I was on this rat race. And I just remember coming to a breaking point. And it was actually when I was married to my 2nd husband, who was abusive. And I thought, I've got to learn to love myself. And then I went back. You have to go back to where this began. And it began because this is where we don't compare our life, because I go, well, my life wasn't as traumatic as yours, Stacy, because I didn't get beaten up. However, this is what trauma is. Trauma is how our body and how we respond to a trauma. It's not the actual, physical thing or the event. And I remember, like, my love language is physical touch. Well, I never got hugged after I was 4 years old. That's a huge thing for a child. I am such a touchy-feely person. So it's not, when you look at that, I wasn't hugged. I wasn't told I was loved. I knew I was loved. My mum did beautiful acts of service. She sat with me each day. I was the youngest one to go to school. I could read and write by the time I went to school. I had all of that beautiful care, but she's not demonstrative. Didn't tell me she loved me. And that played a huge effect on me. And then I had a dad who would scream and shout every morning. Every morning. He hated getting out of bed, hated it with a vengeance. My mum had to get him out of bed. And that tension in the house, that energy, because I'm a highly sensitive person, I'm empathic. And I'd be lying in bed, and I remember I can still feel it, this tightness in my chest, the tightness in my throat, and he'd be going, and it was like that. I could hear it every morning, and he'd be slamming things, and he'd be in a really foul mood. I remember my mum used to make him toast, and he loved burnt toast. Well, burnt toast sets me off on a PTSD thing now. The smell of burnt toast, it makes me, I have to leave the room because I still don't like it. And each morning for like my whole childhood, until my mum and dad separated when I was 12, it was like that. That's a lot of pent up tension. And then he'd leave the house, and my mum would try to make it fun for us then. The adverts would come on the telly, and we'd dance around a little bit, and she'd do our hair for school. But I never went to school a relaxed child. I was in high alert, didn't make friends very easy. And it was just hard. It was just and school was just difficult for me. I loved learning, but I didn't like the people necessarily. I didn't like how they acted. I always wanted to be inclusive and kind. There was so much meanness around me that I didn't like it. All of these things affected me. I had to have a heart operation when I was 7 years old. I was left in hospital on my own. These things are traumatic, even though they don't feel traumatic necessarily at the time. You just get on and do them. And so the knock-on effect for me was like, I went and got pregnant when I was 14 and had to have a hideous termination. I didn't tell people, which then made me feel guilt and shame for the next 20 years and brought on this depression until I had a nervous breakdown. So when you go back and you get the clues, it's like a treasure map, and you follow the map, and the treasure is where your self-worth story began. Because as soon as you can unravel that, and as soon as you can heal that, well, you're free. You're free, and that's the biggest treasure that you can ever find. And so I chose one day to learn to love myself. Didn't know how I was going to do it, but did. And ever since then, I've been an advocate for helping people love themselves. So I'm really grateful for my journey. And I've had to go through lots of therapy. I've had to do lots of somatic stuff and mainstream therapy and coaching, and I don't regret a single part of it. It was, every single penny was money invested well.
That's an amazing story. I got goosebumps just listening to it. So thanks for sharing that, because, you know, like before you do this work, those kind of stories, they have so much weight on you, eh, Joanne?
Yeah. And you know, it's the knock-on effect. You know, you said you went through 7 cycles. And you could see, then you could physically see the cycle. For some people, it's way more subtle than that, isn't it? You make the same mistakes over and over again, but they're just packaged in very different paper. But when you actually look back and you go, oh, that relationship didn't work because that, I married my dad. I did that. Or I was fighting for scraps of love, whatever it is, or, you know, that job didn't work out, or I didn't get on with that boss. There's the same mistakes coming up over and over again until you are ready to learn your lesson. You learned your 3 years ago, Stacy, the 7th time. I learned mine when I was about 38, I think it was. So about 10 years ago now, 9 years ago. I remember just sitting there going, fuck, man, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to die. And my kids are not going to have a mum, and they're my everything. He's going to kill me. I need to love myself. And I'm not making these mistakes ever again. Don't get me wrong. I've made more mistakes since. Because you're in growth, you're in evolution, and you think you're not making mistakes. And then you go, oh, no, there's still a little bit of it there. I'm going to pull back. But it's having that conscious awareness.
You said a couple of really powerful things, you know, like, you know, everything is normalized now. So you being in hospital and left from your parents, that's normalized, but it's not normal.
No.
You know, it's not normal. You know, like I did the research, and, you know, back in our primal days, we grew up in tribes of 30 to 100 people. The first 7 years of a life, mum and the woman looked after the children. Dad equaled safety. He was the protector, the provider, the creator, and the women were so safe they were able to love and pour into the children. As they got older, the boys would individuate and go with the men and the things like that. So even if you, and then you shared about how your dad was. So we've got to form an attachment style to our environment to survive.
Yeah.
Let that be known. So myself and Joanne, we had to form an attachment to pain. That was our template of love. That's why you look, Joanne said she called in a man that was abusive. The fear of her father, you know, like all these things. Once you start connecting the dots, you go, oh my, fuck. I'm feeling the same way I felt as a 7-year-old girl on my bed in my relationship with my husband at 30 or 35 or 25. But it's become so normal to you that it's not until you start to see that, oh, this isn't what I want. It's what I'm getting, but it's not what I want. But how do I stop that?
And I think, you know, deep down as well, that you don't deserve it. There's that, you know, no matter how much I hated myself, and I was in a very bad place of self-loathing, like even to the part where I had such bad body dysmorphia, it affected everything. But I actually couldn't even look at other people. It got so bad. And I was like, I love people. It doesn't matter what shape or size they are. I love people. I think people are beautiful, but it just overtook me. But somewhere deep inside of me, I still knew I deserved better. And it's funny, you know, it's like, I did deserve better, and we all deserve better, but are you going to give yourself better?
Yeah, and I think you said you got to that point where it broke. I think that's, like I've just learned as human beings until it's broken, until you've hit rock bottom,
Mm,
you're gonna keep signing up for the same assignment because it's normal. It might suck bad, but it's normal and it's your template of connection, it's your template of belonging.
hmm.
Doesn't mean it's right, but until you go, you know what? Fuck, this is what I've got, but I don't want that anymore. And you
Hmm.
can't consciously go, that's the first step, but you've really got to go into that unconscious to unpack it. Like you said, go back, pull the pieces of the puzzle, dissolve them, resolve them, and so you can actually move. Because if it was easy to go, I'm going to love myself and make it happen in an instant, you just do it, right? Like that's the first step, but you've got to dissolve and go back and look at that guilt and that shame and the pain and like unpack that bag of rocks so that you can actually just, oh, this is me authentically. I was always love. I just forgot it.
Yeah. And you know what though, healing, when we are unpacking that journey for ourselves, it's, I believe you have to love yourself first to do it. There has to be an element of that self-love and appreciation. And that's when I'm working with people, we start in the self-love aspect, but it goes to healing immediately because the two go hand in hand. It's not really step one, step two. It's let's do this together. But if you are loving on yourself and you appreciate yourself, it's like, no, I'm going to do this. I know I want to do this.
And I think that's a big switch that happens because as soon as you go, whatever it is, I don't care. I say to people, I don't care whether you work with me, Joanne, go where you feel called to go, where your conscience is calling you to go, because that's actually the ultimate form of self love. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I've got here. I don't know how to get out of it, but I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out. And that's actually saying, okay, and amongst all this fear, there's that part of you, the soul, I believe it is, or that, that free child is like, okay, it's time for us to do something so that we can thrive and do what we came here to do and enjoy our lives. And for
Yeah.
some of us, it's bigger journeys this lifetime. For some of us, not. Maybe some of us, I believe, aren't meant to transcend in this journey. Some of us are going to go back around. But, if your conscience is calling you, and every culture since the dawn of time has said your conscious is the authentic voice of God guiding you on your journey. The sooner you listen to it and stop listening to that egoic voice, the wounded inner child, the protector, then
Mm.
the sooner you'll be able to transcend into your true your true power, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you should say that because I had a lady come to see me the other day and she went, I've no idea why I'm here. I don't know what's happening. How do you even work? I don't know, but I'm here and I was called to be here. And by the end of the session, after tears and huge realizations, because it was literally like once you have one realization, it's like a domino, isn't it? Then the dominoes go, and it was like, chick, 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 chick. And she was like, oh my God. And by the end of the session, she's like, oh my God, it's like the best thing she's ever done, but because she actually followed that intuition. And you go,
That,
you go,
that,
you.
that's the most important thing you can do. Like if you get a call and you might not know why, but there's like this inner knowing that says you need to do this. You might not know why,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no coincidence on the journey. You'll sit in the space with that particular person or in that environment, and one penny will drop or one domino will drop, and you'll go, oh shit. After an hour or 2 hours, you'll go, fuck, now I know why. And now at an even deeper level, I know why things have been going the way they've been going. So that's a beautiful testament to, and I love that too because there's no expectations from that person. They've just rocked up going, oh, everything's not too bad. And next minute, smash that reality with a sledgehammer.
Yep.
And then you get to start putting it back together from truth, from a foundation of truth.
Yeah. And that's all we're trying to do, isn't it, Stacey? Trying to help people get back to their truth, back to their authenticity, back to love, back to the true them. And it's a beautiful gift to the world when you give yourself in your truest form back to the world. And I always say my beautiful line is we're going to heal the world one person at a time.
Yeah, that's the only way. And you think about how many masks we put on from the minute we're born, how far away we get from our authentic self. And what I've realized is the further you get away from your authenticity, the worse the suffering gets.
Yeah.
And it's not until you go, oh, fuck, I can't go anymore. Like you said, I was the same. I can't do this again. That you start going back towards your authentic self, and it's just peeling back the layers to, oh, that I don't need that mask anymore. I don't need that survival strategy anymore. But you can't see it until you know, can have someone to reflect or mirror back to you what's in the blind spot, because we've been doing this since we were little kids. It's
Mm-hmm.
like your heart beating or your breath, you don't know what's happening that's making that work. It's just on autopilot.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. Oh, Stacey, this one's been a good one. This one's been a juicy one today. So thank you also for being vulnerable and sharing your story, because no matter how many times we do it, it's still brave, isn't it? And we do it. Why do we do it? Because we want people to understand that everybody's been through shit. Everybody's got a story, and the more we can unravel our stories and get back to our truth, the better life is. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. And, if you always remember that's your biggest fear, being exposed. So just expose yourself. Bring
Yeah.
everything to the table, because once there's nothing in the shadows, there's nothing that you can be exposed on. And that's where your true freedom lies, because we've all got a story. And never judge yourself based on someone else's story, because the thing I've found working with hundreds of clients now, it's often the smallest thing for someone that's led them to a life of so much pain and suffering. But there's this guilt or shame around, oh, fuck, my life wasn't as bad as theirs, or, I had fucking beautiful upbringing. No, you don't. No, you not always did. You're just in the illusion that you did. So, you know, it's always going to go back to your parents or caregivers, always.
Always.
So we're not, the other thing I always share with my clients is we're not judging them, but we're actually going back to resolve your interpretation of that experience. And often you'll end up having a better relationship with them anyway. So, you got to do that. You got to do that journey.
You do. So if you've got any more questions, we're going to be back next week. Are we going to be back to Tuesday,
Yeah,
Stacey, next week? We're
Tuesday
back
we're
to our
on.
Tuesday next week about 2 o'clock. We're going live. So if you've got any questions, send them in. As you heard, they come through anonymously. So we will not be saying your names. So you can be brave. You don't have to put it on the post below. You can either message either of us individually and we'll bring your questions to the table. So
Yeah.
Stacey, thanks very much. It's been awesome. Can't wait to see you next week.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks to all the viewers too.